Today on Personally Speaking, our guest is the iconic singer and composer and actress Toni Tennille. Please stay with us. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Msgr Jim Lisante, and singer, songwriter, actress Toni Tennille joins me now. Toni's best known as one half of the 1970s duo Captain and Tennille with her husband Daryl Dragon. Their signature song is Love Will Keep Us Together, which won the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 1976. Toni Tennille was born Catherine Antoinette Tennille in Montgomery, Alabama. She studied classical piano and went on to attend Auburn University, where she was the sole female singer with the school's highly lauded big band, the Auburn Knights. The Captain and Tennille went on to become one of the most popular musical duos of the 1970s and 1980s, and they went on to host the Captain and Tennille show on ABC. Toni also lent her voice to songs by Elton John and Pink Floyd's rock album The Wall. She's currently starring as Dolly Levi in the Yavapai College Performing Arts Center production of Hello, Dolly in Prescott, Arizona. Toni's here with us today to tell us about her current role and to talk about her life, her career, and the values that matter the most to her. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome to Personally Speaking the great singer Toni Tennille. I want to thank Toni Tennille for coming on our show, Personally Speaking. Delighted to have her, a huge fan for many, many years. And Toni, let me ask you this first and foremost. I'm a big believer that we are so strongly influenced by our family of origin. Catherine and Frank, the mom and dad who formed and shaped you. When you look back on your early life, what did they do right?
Well, first of all, they were music lovers, and my father sang with Bob Crosby's big band in the late 1930s. In fact, you can still, if you go on YouTube, you can put in Frank Tennille, and you can hear him sing. He had a lovely voice.
Wow.
And my mother, he taught me about the great standards and the great singers of the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, early 50s, and so forth. And my mother had one of the very first talk shows ever, and she was live 5 days a week and did it for years. And I, would watch her do her show, and I learned a lot from my mom as well. But I got classical experience. I studied classical music for 10 years, piano. And from my dad, I got all the wonderful big band stuff and things like that. And of course, I was raised in the era of rock and roll and that kind of thing. So I have a lot of background there.
Now, you've talked, Toni, about your parents sharing with you the music of the great people from Sinatra to Sarah Vaughan, all sorts of wonderful people. Here's what I'm wondering. When you hear them and you hear their interpretations, how do you find your voice? Like, there's something so distinctive about you that you took even old standards, but you make them your own. How do you come? Go ahead.
That's the thing that it was important to me. I remember Edie Gourmet telling me once that she was so enamored of Sarah Vaughan, which we all were, and she incorporated a lot of Sarah's techniques into her own interpretations. And when she was young, and she went to see Sarah at a concert, and she said afterwards, I just thought you were wonderful. And she said, any advice for me? And Sarah said, you be Edie. I'm Sarah. You be Edie. And so, you need to be who you are. And of course, you're influenced by all these great singers. Sinatra, in my case, Joe Williams, Sarah Vaughan, Carmen McRae, Ella Fitzgerald. They were all important to me.
I remember falling in love as a young man with the song that came out of the group Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I always loved it, especially being a guy in ministry, the wedding song. But when I heard your version of the wedding song, it was entirely new and different and beautiful. And but again, I'm wondering, the guy who wrote it doesn't sing it as well as you do.
Well, that often happens to songwriters. They'll have somebody. Sorry, we have allergies here right now in
Oh,
West. Yeah, but it will happen. If you give permission for somebody to record a song you've written, you never quite know what they're going to come up with.
yeah.
And sometimes it's not as good as you would have done it. Sometimes it's better or more interesting.
Right. Well, you certainly mastered that song for sure and made it your own. I'm wondering, because I know there was an upbringing in Alabama, but I know nothing about what was Toni Tennille's experience of the journey of faith. Was there a journey of faith as you were growing up?
Well, I was raised Episcopal in the
Okay.
Episcopal Church and was confirmed in the Episcopal Church and sang in the choir from the time I was really young.
Okay.
And I enjoyed, it was the Church of the Ascension, which was what they call low Episcopal church. I didn't know there was a high one at that time until later. But actually, I don't know what you are, but I switched over to the Presbyterian church because they had a better choir and they sang more interesting music. Isn't that ridiculous? But yeah, that's my background.
No. Actually, every African-American actress or singer we've ever had on always says it began, in the choir. Beyonce was one of our guests, and she too said, it began in church. It began with singing with the choir. So, Toni Tennille, you may not be African-American, but you have the same roots as our friends in the African community. I have to ask you this too. We all know that you had this incredibly active and busy career, but I'm wondering, like, the time in between, when you're not on the stage, what does Toni Tennille do or did to have a sane life, a normal life? Like, what do you do with downtime?
Well, that's always been my aim in life. And that was one of the things of being famous that I had a hard time with. I wanted to be a regular person, which is what I am. Mm-hmm. And after I retired and we moved here, Daryl and I moved here to Prescott, it's pronounced, Arizona. I decided I was going to just retire. But what I did, I had two things that I did during that time. One was I immediately started singing with the master chorale at Yavapai College. Okay. And that's a chorale that sings all of the great masters, Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart and all that. And then also to occasionally sing with the Pops chorus, which, does wonderful things as well. But I kept busy that way. But also, when I came to Prescott, I had two Australian shepherds that I brought with me. And I found out there was a big Australian shepherd scene here. I got very involved in that and began to show my dogs in show, regular conformation shows, but also in agility trials. And I did that for quite a while. And one of my dogs, my Australian shepherds, who passed away, unfortunately, when he was quite young, but he and I worked at the local hospital as a therapy team for about 6 years.
Amazing.
Working with patients and visiting patients and their families and hospital staff, which was a great joy to me.
Toni Tennille is our guest. Toni, I've heard from many sources that you're a big fan of animals, and as you mentioned, the shepherds. But is this a lifelong love of yours, or is it something more recent?
Oh, no. I've always had dogs and cats. Mm-hmm. I just happen to have right now 2 Maine Coon kittens. Okay. Do you know anything about the Maine Coons?
I do not.
Okay. Well, they are quite large. And in fact, I got these 2 kittens from I've never gotten a purebred kitten, but this time I did. And they grow to be quite large, and they keep growing until they're about 4 years old. My 11-month-old Maine Coon kittens, brother and sister, he weighs 23 pounds now at 11 months, and she weighs 19 pounds at 11 months. Okay. So I've got those, and I love all sorts of animals. I rode horses for years when I was younger, until I was about in my 60s, and then I quit. I did other things instead, and I hiked and climbed all over the Sierras. That's where my heart always is, in the Sierras. For years and years, climbed Mount Whitney twice. And Daryl and I moved here to Prescott for two reasons. First of all, we didn't want the amount of snow we were getting in northern Nevada all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We would get 6-7 feet of snow every winter.
Right.
And Prescott has some snow, but nothing like that.
Wow.
And also the fact that it is a fabulous center for the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Artistic people are all over this town. And we've got sculptors, we've got writers, we've got poets, we've got everything you can think of here. So it's a very creative place to live.
Folks may or may not know that Toni Tennille, several governors, in fact, appointed her as the ambassador at large to the arts. And I mention that, Toni, because around the country we're hearing more and more that arts programs, especially in most schools, have been limited or cut out because of budget constraints. Any idea why we're doing that, and what's the reason we should not be doing that?
You should definitely not be doing that. We need arts in the school, arts and music. In fact, I know we're going to talk a little later on about the Hello Dolly that I'm doing, but right. I am doing that for Yavapai College Performing Arts Theater. They have a fabulous theater department where they teach not only acting and singing and dancing and all that, but how to build sets, how to build them and design them, how to build and design costumes. I am so impressed with the work they do. So I agreed to do Dolly. I am not getting paid. I'm not getting a cent. Every penny that they get from the performance of Dolly is going to the theater department and the humanities department at Yavapai College.
Now, Toni, when you take on an iconic role like Dolly Levi, or I was amazed to read that you've also been someone who took over that great role created originally by Julie Andrews, Victor Victoria. Is it intimidating in any way to find your own way of bringing Toni Tennille into that particular role?
No.
Okay.
Because that's something that I always want. I always want whoever I'm doing to be honest, an honest performer, an honest person. Let me see if I can explain that. Dolly has been done beautifully by so many famous women, people that I know. And they are, they have done it. It can be done as just kind of a farce, a comedy, yuck a minute, a wink, wink kind of nod thing to the audience. But when I went over the part of Dolly when Dr. Ralston asked me if I would do it, I went back and I read the Thornton Wilder book, The Matchmaker, because that's basically what Dolly's based on. And Dolly is a person. She's a human. She appears to other people like she's just, I'm going to, get these people together and I do all sorts of things and I'm funny as heck, which she is. But she's also very lonely, which people don't understand in her backstory. She was married to a man named Ephraim Levi. Right. She was born Dolly Gallagher, but she married Ephraim Levi. And evidently he was the love of her life. They adored each other. And he died very young before they had a chance to have children. And so she was left very poor. They didn't make a lot of money. And she had to figure out a way to support herself. And she loved the idea of matchmaking. And in my opinion, she does it because she loves to put people together. It reminds her of when she and Ephraim were young. And she lives alone. She talks about that in a very famous monologue about how she lives alone. She one night, a oak leaf fell out of her Bible. And that was a leaf she placed there when Ephraim asked her to marry him. And she looks at it now, and it's a perfectly good leaf, but it has no color and no life. And she realizes then that life is passing. She's got to get back into life again. And of course, she's always asking Ephraim about this. And she says, let me go. Let me go. I want to live again. And she goes into the famous before the parade passes by. And she has her eye on Horace Vandergelder, who lives in Yonkers, who owns a hay and feed store. And evidently he is the famous half a millionaire, which in that period of time, around that 1900, he has about 60,000 cash. But he's incredibly penurious and stingy.
Right.
And she looks at that money that he has and thinks, what good that could do if she could get some of that money out to people who need it. And her husband, Ephraim Levi, always believed in, this is also another famous quote from Dolly. He says to her, money is like, pardon the expression, manure.
Right.
It's not worth a thing unless it's spread around, encouraging young things to grow. And so that's in addition, of course, to she's tired, she's working hard, but she thinks of all the good that money can do. And Horace is a cranky and miserable old guy, and she knows that she could do good with what he's got. And she likes him in spite of how, cranky he is all the time. But anyway, she decides, I'm going to marry him. And she talks to Ephraim and says, I'm going to marry Horace Van de Gelder for his money and send it out circulating around the world. And it's very fun to be Dolly. She knows how to handle him. She knows exactly how to get him to marry her. And he thinks he's a widower too. And he thinks he wants a 19-year-old, and
right.
to clean the house and do all these things. And she realizes, no, he needs me. And I think there are places in this Dolly where people are actually going to tear up. I cry when I listen at rehearsal. There's certain scenes where it makes me cry for how beautiful it is and how wonderful, love is when two people can find it together. So there's more to it than the funny stuff. And indeed, it's hysterically funny. But I think a lot of today's women are going to say, that's exactly how I feel. I've got to get back into life. I can't keep doing what I'm doing right now.
All right. Toni Tennille is our guest, and we're talking about her performances as Dolly Levi and Hello, Dolly. Anytime someone decides to do stage work, it's challenging. All these actors in New York who come on our program talk about being exhausted every night. There you go, willing to take on the role of Dolly. I got to ask you, though, Toni, last week I was 30 and now I'm in my 60s. Life, as you know, passes us by quickly. And I got to ask you, how well has Toni Tennille handled the reality that we're all aging?
I think I've done pretty well.
All right.
I've done all of my life. I've taken really good care of myself. I've been, careful what I was eating. I never did drugs. I, occasionally had a glass of wine. That's about it. I always exercised and kept myself fit. And I'm 82 now. When I step on that stage, I'll be 82. And I don't think people will even think about my age.
That's amazing.
I really don't. There are things obviously I can't do anymore. I told Dr. Ralston, I said, well, okay, I'm your Dolly, but I'm not going to do any splits or tour jetés. You got to, tailor the choreography for me, which they have done. It's just wonderful choreography. And they've also let me do kind of my own thing when I wanted to. But the one thing, I can act. I'm a wonderful singer. Right. I know comedy. I've loved comedy all my life. And it's one of those things you can't be taught. That's my opinion. You either know it and can do it, or you can't.
You've either got it or not.
It's like with jazz. You either know how to swing or you don't. And I learned how to swing. I know how to swing.
Now, Toni Tennille, in addition to her great entertainment career, has also put together a very poignant book called Toni Tennille, a Memoir. Toni, there's something I want to address there, because there are so many people who listen and watch a program like ours who say, if they would read that memoir, which I hope they will, they would say, that's my story in terms of marriages that we stay in that are sometimes
Yep.
not what they should be. And you talk specifically about the emotional distance, the lack of intimacy.
Yeah.
Do you have any insights at all for the many spouses who are out there who are married to someone who just can't be what we hope they would be? Is there a way to break down the wall? Is there a way to challenge the frozenness of their hearts, to move past paralysis, to get people to feel and to express and to share intimacy? Having lived it, do you have any insights into how do we break the wall?
I gotta tell you, Jim, I tried for 40 years
Wow.
with Daryl. And then of course, we had the fact that we made wonderful music together.
Right.
And I was very inspired. I was probably my most creative as a songwriter when I was with Daryl. But he was one of the most difficult men.
In Toni Tennille's book, she talks about the fact that Daryl had to cope with, among other things, a highly domineering father. And it just was a reminder in reading that a parent and the way in which we either love our children or don't love our children can make all the difference for our whole life. That whole man carried the scars of the family that raised him, whereas you, in so many ways, you flourished because of the family that loved you. And when we talk about your very, very multifaceted career and the great success you have, I got to raise something that every actor in New York talks about, that we look at your successes, but every actor, every singer has gone after that role that was perfect for them, that it didn't happen. When in your life it hasn't happened, how does Toni Tennille handle disappointment or rejection or what could have, would have, should have, would have been?
I think, I'm trying to think of when I was rejected.
It's good if it's a struggle to remember.
Well, I remember when Daryl and I, started getting, trying to get a record company to be interested in us. And I remember we sent out something we created, and we got a note back saying, we already have a blonde singer. And so, okay. And then I remember this was a rejection that kind of stung me a little bit while I thought about it. And I don't think I've ever told anybody this. When we moved up, we quit, doing a lot of Captain and Tennille stuff, and we moved up to Northern Nevada. And I had written some songs for other people, with the idea of shopping them to other artists. A lot of times I would get, if the song was so good, why didn't she record it? Well, it might have been because it wasn't right for my voice, or maybe it was a sad song that people don't like to hear Captain and Tennille do. But anyway, I had written a really wonderful song that I thought at the time would be really good for, this is why I'm so damn old. Pardon my French. Sorry.
That's okay.
Gosh, she was the great artist, the black singer that died too young.
Whitney Young.
Whitney, okay.
Yeah.
And I sent in a song that I wrote called Love Survives, that I wrote actually for Howie Greenfield, who wrote all the lyrics for Neil Sedaka. And he wrote the lyrics for Love Will Keep Us Together, and I adored that man. And when he passed, I started thinking, how would he be remembered? Of course, Neil was the most famous of the two because he recorded all the songs, but Howie wrote the lyrics. And I was on a hike up at Lake Tahoe by myself, and I thought, he will be remembered for the music that he wrote, the great songs he wrote. So I went back home, got to the piano, and wrote a song called Love Survives. And it's Love Survives in a song and a memory. Love survives, though everything else is gone. In the darkest night, there will always be a light, because love will survive. And it's a big, giant ballad, power ballad thing, which is not really, I wasn't into singing that kind of thing at the time. So I sent a thing of it, a recording of it, to Clive Davis, who was the record company that she was with at the time.
Right.
And I said, I was wondering if this could be considered for Whitney Houston, because she could have knocked it out of the park. And I got a note back from him actually through his secretary, I suppose, who said, "Thank you very much. It was a lovely song. But Whitney, chooses her own songs for her albums." And he said, and actually you and Daryl don't have the cachet we're looking for.
Oh.
In other words, we weren't hip enough, and we didn't do drugs. We were just kind of, and I thought, oh, wow, that stings.
Yes.
But then I thought, well, yeah, I understand.
You're very
Really.
understanding, Toni. You are.
I said, I understand. I mean, why you had to tell me that, I don't know. But I understand why, because I never, we were never the hip couple. Even though I knew that we were both really excellent musicians, and that we were deeper than people thought we were, and that's okay. But I always knew that our work would probably be respected after, after we had our big day. And that's kind of what happened. When we quit touring and performing, and all of a sudden I'm getting, "Where are you? We need that. We need your music. Where are you?" And, it's just, you have your time. I always understood that. And then it goes, and you go on to something else. I would not change one thing about my life or the decisions I made. Didn't work out with Daryl, but we did some wonderful things together. We touched a lot of people with our music.
Sure
and
did.
now I'm doing things that I'm loving also.
Yeah. I want to thank Toni Tennille for being with us. Toni, obviously, the singing and the songwriting and the acting and the dancing and everything you do, you're an amazingly talented woman, still in your 80s doing great stuff, being fully human, fully alive. But even in what you just said in terms of, not everything worked out perhaps with Daryl, but even in something like your memoir, I think that there are tons of people in marriages that are challenging who would draw hope from the fact that you hung in there and you tried every way you could. And even after the breakup, you loved and you were there for him. You're remarkable, not just as a performer, but as a human being. And I'm just so grateful for you sharing some of your amazing life story with us. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me on, Jim. I sure appreciate it.
I'll be praying for your endless energy on stage as Hello, Dolly.
I'll be looking for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Toni. Be well, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.
As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you need to reach me, you can write me at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to this show or past episodes by going on YouTube and searching under Personally Speaking with Msgr Lisante, where you'll be able to watch shows as well. And please don't forget to click like and subscribe. I'm privileged to serve as host and executive producer, Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.